Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Mary Rita Nelson. I am the president of the League of Women Voters of DeKalb County. I would like to start tonight's discussion on election integrity and the 2024 election. I want to introduce first Matt Dietrich. He's the Public Information Officer from the Illinois State Board of Elections, and Tasha Sims, our DeKalb County Clerk and Recorder. Welcome, both of you. And Matt, if you'd like to start out with your statement first, or your
Sure, I'd be glad to. I'm Matt Dietrich. I'm the Public Information Officer with the Illinois State Board of Elections, and a lot of people are unclear about what it is that the Illinois State Board of Elections does. And I generally define the agency by what it doesn't do, because that's an easier way to understand it. What we don't do are we do not conduct elections. We don't set up polling places. We do not directly register voters. In Illinois, all of those functions, the main functions of our election system, are carried out by the 108 local election authorities throughout the state. And that's 102 county election authorities, mostly county clerks, and 6 municipal boards of election. They're the ones that actually set up the polling places. They recruit their poll workers, they train them, and they also do the actual registration of voters. What the Illinois State Board of Elections does is act as an administrative support to those 108 local election authorities. One of the main things that we do is provide things like training for election judges. For a lot of the counties that aren't large enough to do their own judge training, we send our people out to do that. We also test the voting systems, and the voting systems that are in use in Illinois must be approved by us. We have a division of voting and registration systems that does that testing, along with by following federal standards. And they also help the local election authorities do their pre-testing before each election. So we're 41 days now from the November 5th election, and about a week or so out from that, each election authority will have its own public test, and they will show anybody who wants to show up and watch. They'll put their equipment through its paces. We will often select some jurisdictions to go out and check before that. Our voting and registration systems people do that. And since 2018, the State Board of Elections has taken on what probably has become the most visible and certainly one of the most important functions, and that is assisting local election authorities with their cybersecurity measures. And that basically was an outgrowth of something that happened in the summer of 2016 that some of you may remember because it was in the news. In July of 2016, there was some routine maintenance that was being done to the statewide voter registration database that the State Board of Elections maintains. Now, under federal law, every state is required to have a database of all of its registered voters. In Illinois, the State Board of Elections maintains that database, and every night, those 108 local election authorities upload their new voter registration information into that database because changes are happening all the time. New voters are being added. Voters that are no longer they are either removed from the rolls. Some are being moved to inactive status. It changes every day, gets uploaded to our database. In 2016, one of our techs was doing some routine maintenance on the system and basically left a window open. And an intruder was able to get into that window and begin injecting information, asking queries to extract information out of the database. So what ended up happening was the intruder was able to get bits and pieces of encrypted information from roughly 75,000 voter registrations. And we very quickly, when we discovered this, notified the Attorney General, who then notified federal law enforcement authorities. The Department of Homeland Security came in, and as it turned out, started a partnership that continues now with DHS. As a result of this data breach, one thing that didn't happen was no voter data was changed, no registrations were lost. The Attorney General set up a hotline. We notified all affected voters and let them know that if they saw any unusual information with their personal information, they should call the Attorney General's hotline, because we were concerned primarily at that point about identity theft. Didn't have a single call to that hotline. The November 2016 election went off without a hitch. No voter registrations were changed in that attack. It was closed and we moved on, but we changed everything about the way that data is handled within our agency. And roughly 2 years after that happened, we used a $13 million federal grant to establish what is now known as the Cyber Navigator program. And that's a system where we hired 8 technicians, and they are assigned to 4 geographic zones around the state. And each of the cyber navigators is assigned roughly 25 jurisdictions, 25 county clerks or boards of election. They maintain communication with them. They visit the offices. They conduct risk assessments. They train staff about good cyber hygiene practices. And the intent of the Cyber Navigator program was to make sure that all of our local election authorities, from the smallest counties to the biggest, have the same access to the same level of cybersecurity resources and training that we have at the state level and that a lot of our larger jurisdictions already had. Some of the smaller counties didn't even have their own IT staffs devoted to the county clerk. Depending on the size of your county, the county may not have had the resources to maintain that. Another major change was, I mentioned earlier that counties upload their voter data every night to us on that database. Well, now under the Cyber Navigator program, none of them are doing that on public internet connections. They're doing that through the Illinois Century Network, which is a closed network that's used by Illinois state government. So your voter information, when it goes from your local clerk's office and comes up to us, it's never going out onto the public internet. Another major part of our duties now has become, along with election security, is guarding against election misinformation. Our Information Security Division does a lot to protect our internal systems from any outside intruders, like what we had in 2016. And we also have someone who is now stationed in the Illinois State Police State Terrorism and Intelligence Center in Springfield, and they're monitoring social media all the time for any kind of election misinformation that goes out on social media. Since 2018, we've also partnered with the Illinois National Guard so that we can share cybersecurity personnel from them, because the Department of Defense has the top cybersecurity network in the country and one of the best in the world. So we always have them at the ready in case there's any type of cyber incident anywhere in the state around Election Day. We'll discuss more about some details about what we've been doing lately and the whole issue of election disinformation, which is a part of election security. I think that will come up a little bit later, but I don't want to monopolize all of our time. So now I'd like to introduce the DeKalb County Clerk and Recorder, Tasha Sims. As I mentioned, the local election authorities are the ones who really do the heavy lifting when it comes election time. So Tasha, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity to speak with everyone. One of the things that I'm really trying to do in my role now is try to bring more light to our office and let the public know that we are here. We're in your community. We are ready to answer any questions, emails. We want people to come in. So that's really just making sure that we gather as much information as possible and get that out in multiple different ways to reach as many people as we can. Um, I, I'm constantly now telling people to try to make sure that any information that they are getting from either their state election websites or any .gov. Part of, a lot of this, we had to get a .gov address, all the election authorities. And I thought at first, I didn't think much of it. And then I went through the process of actually obtaining a .gov website, and it is very rigorous, which means that you have to prove you are a government agency and you are involved with the elections and you're an election authority. So that really makes sure that the information that we're putting out is accurate and for our jurisdictions. Election security is always something that we're trying to combat, of course, making sure that people are trying to contact us for any of their resources, not any local Facebook pages or anything like that. I too try to look at some of our local pages to try to answer any questions that I can, but we don't have the staff or time to really monitor that. We're trying to put out for this election, I tried something different because I understand that, the State Board of Elections has done an amazing job recently at putting out information on Facebook and Instagram. It's been very good to be able to share that information with everyone because we don't always have the resources as well for a lot of the marketing tools and that. But I do try to take that information and more so get it locally. And what we tried to do this election is I sent a postcard to every residential address in the county, just putting out the basic information. And we're wanting to make sure that people are registered to vote, not only registered for the first time, but making sure that if they need to update their address, there are quite a few people that may only be interested in voting in a general election. So it's been a little while since they voted. And so just kind of having them remember you might have gotten married since the last time you voted. You may have moved, and whether that be moved to a different town or even moved to the next apartment over. That all has to continually be updated because I think the foundation of ensuring that our elections are secure is having very clean and accurate voter registration records. And that is something that when I got into office, that was something we did right away, is do some cleanup with some of our precincts, just to cut down on the amount of ballot styles that we had, which then also helps combat some of our costs and things that are associated with elections. But it's really making sure that we have everyone registered that needs to be registered. And that has to do with sending out all our voter information cards. Election mail is not forwardable. So anything that may come back to us in the mail, we then go through our process of sending our next set of mailings. If those come back to us, we have a whole maintenance program that's how we either suspend someone or know that they moved. And just really, I think the gist of it is making sure that our foundation is strong with not only security, but making sure that our voter rolls are clean and accurate as well. So again, I'm sure a lot more questions will be brought up, but I'll
Okay.
leave
Well,
it at that.
let's start with, this is the first question from the public. What steps are taken to ensure voting tabulation is done efficiently and honestly? Are IDs required to vote? And if not, why not, especially in light of the internet breach? So I think that question would go to you, Tommy.
Oh, to me?
No, I think that one would go to
Tasha.
Tanya.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Tasha. Oh,
Yes.
Okay.
There's many different ways. Transparency, of course, is I think one of them to ensure, that the tabulation is efficient and honest. We do our public tests, as Matt had indicated. For this election, it's actually going to be October 30th at 10 o'clock a.m. here in our conference room east. We always invite members of the public. Not that we really get any, but it's open to the public and media to observe that our tabulators are working properly. We always have bipartisan oversight. So making sure that both parties are represented evenly in any counting or tabulation of voter results. We have electronic and manual audits. Obviously, a lot more things are done electronically now, but again, we have paper trails of absolutely everything. So if there is any discrepancies, we can go back through all of our paperwork and find where that discrepancy may be. We take chain of custody very seriously in making sure that our ballots stay with the people who took them and that they get back to us. All of our equipment is certified and it has all of the security tags on it and everything. And we do our recount, our retab afterwards. So there's quite a few things that we try to do to ensure that our tabulation is as honest and efficient as possible. I can go into the ID requirements. I don't know if Matt is probably a little more well-versed to get that across a little better.
yeah, let's put that one to you then.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add also to what Tasha said about the retabulation that Tasha mentioned. That is something that happens after election night, and it's supervised by the State Board of Elections. We at random, we tell every jurisdiction, we tell them 5% of their precincts, they have to run a retabulation to make sure that those numbers are accurate. So you'll hear a lot of people demanding audits, quote unquote audits. And in some states, they do statewide risk limiting audits. Illinois is a bit different because we don't have one voting system that's used throughout the state. So in order to accommodate the 6 different voting systems that clerks may be using throughout the state, we run a 5% retabulation day after the election. So that's a pretty important thing as far as ensuring accuracy. Now on the voter ID issue, it is true, Illinois is not a voter ID state. When you go to get your ballot at your polling place on election day or at the early voting location, or if you apply for a vote by mail ballot, and when you send your vote by mail ballot back in, your signature is your ID. And if you are in a polling place and your signature, if in a polling place, you'll give your name, then you'll be asked to sign for your ballot. If a majority of the election judges, and generally there are 5 election judges working in a precinct, if a majority of those judges, including representation from each party, believes that your signature does not match the signature that they have on record, then they will ask you for ID. So then you would have to show ID. And I believe if you're an inactive voter and you then you've been moved to inactive status and you show up to vote at your precinct, in order to be moved to become an active voter, you do have to show that you do still live in the address that's on record. So that's
Okay.
if the General Assembly saw a problem with voter impersonation, requiring ID. The General Assembly could address that. But Illinois is one of the states where you do not have to produce ID at the polling place. Your signature has to match.
Okay. And I was curious about this because my father, as he aged, his signature changed tremendously. It never seemed to be a problem when he went to vote. But is there a way, Tasha, to change yours to rewrite, not to change your signature so it's more like as we get older?
Yes.
My signature's definitely changed.
Yes. And we tell it's not so much the exact signature as the handwriting. There are certain strokes and motions that you use in your lettering that is really what we kind of look for to identify. But again, a lot of people nowadays, their registration is coming from the Secretary of State, the DMV. And of course, we know signing on that little digital pad is not the greatest signature that you can produce. If we see that there is a signature that is, it is the person, but it's a little off, or someone, of course, as they age, their signature can change a bit. We tell our judges that when you do sign, they can either tag that application. We still use paper applications on election day here. So they can tab that application. We give them little sticky notes. Please update signature. We also have just regular cards that we send out. They're little signature cards that someone can update their signature that way as well.
Thank you. All right, let's go to another question by the public. Given that Illinois now issues standard driver's license to non-citizens as positive ID, and that the federal governmental agency were directed to register same when assisting them, how are they not voting?
Okay, I can talk about that a bit, but first I want to address. There is that question is kind of premised on a falsehood. The federal government is not encouraging any non-citizens to vote. There have been a lot of social media posts alleging this, that as soon as they cross the border, they're being registered in Illinois, and that's just not possible. It's not happening because it's not possible. Now, I'll give a little background because I've kind of seen this develop throughout this year. The non-citizen voting theme really gained momentum when busloads of migrants from Venezuela started being bused to primarily Chicago from Texas. That generated the falsehood that they were being sent here, that they were being registered to vote and encouraged to vote for a certain party, and so forth and so on. Now, the other thing that happened in Illinois was on July 1st, a law went into effect that allows the Secretary of State's office now to issue standard driver's licenses to non-citizens. And the confluence of those two things led to a really big piece of misinformation that continues to gain momentum no matter how much we try. And that is, either there's an allegation that because the Secretary of State and driver's license facilities are part of the automatic voter registration program in Illinois, that these non-citizens are getting licenses and being registered to vote immediately. That isn't true. The other thing, I'll stop there just for a second. It's not true because at the Secretary of State's office, anyone who does not produce a Social Security number when getting their driver's license is automatically prohibited from being part of the AVR process. So if you're not giving a Social Security number, which citizens will have Social Security numbers, you will not be put into AVR. You will not even get the chance to do that. Now, the other thing that people need to understand, and this is something that's not very well understood in the public, but under the 1993 National Voter Registration Act, federal law established that proof of citizenship is constituted in anyone who registers to vote must sign an attestation that under the penalty of prosecution, criminal prosecution, I certify I am a United States citizen, I am 18, I am qualified to vote, in this case, in the state of Illinois. That is your proof of citizenship. No election authority in the United States can demand proof of citizenship as a condition of voter registration. That is set forth in the NVRA. It was upheld by a Supreme Court decision in 2013 that said forcing voters, registrants, to produce proof of citizenship, to produce those documents, is akin to being a poll tax. So that's federal law. So election authorities cannot, if someone is willing to attest to their citizenship, that is their proof of citizenship. Now, the Secretary of State's office is not bound by the National Voter Registration Act because the Secretary of State's office is not an election agency. They are a license issuing agency, and they are fully authorized to confirm citizenship status so that they know the status of the driver's license that they're issuing. If they're issuing a real ID license, they need to see what someone's citizenship status is. So that's something that people do need to understand, that your county clerks cannot demand that you show a birth certificate, for example, or naturalization papers. If someone attests to it, then they are considered, that's proof of citizenship. Now, the other thing, a side piece of misinformation to that is the allegation that, well, non-citizens, now they can get regular driver's licenses. That means they can take their license to the county clerk and register to vote. That's not true either. Because in Illinois, you do not need a driver's license to register to vote. You need two pieces of ID, one that shows your identity. Generally, people do use a driver's license for that. And one that shows your voting residence. So oftentimes they both show the same things. But a lot of times, people will use a driver's license and then maybe a bank statement that's mailed to them or a pay stub that's got their home address on it to show their address. Well, for decades now, if someone is not a citizen and they want to commit vote fraud and expose themselves to federal criminal prosecution, then they always could have done that. They didn't need a driver's license to do that. But the fact is, non-citizens don't do that. The disincentive is just too strong. The penalty for if you're caught registering to vote and voting if you're not a citizen, the penalty is instant deportation. And one thing that everyone has to understand when we're talking in the context of primarily what we're talking about now are the Venezuelans, they are in the country legally. They are awaiting asylum hearings. They do not want to do anything to jeopardize their potential for gaining asylum and staying in this country. The first thing that's going to get checked in an asylum process, if someone is entering the citizenship process, if someone is renewing their green card, if they're a work visa, student visa, first thing that gets checked in that background check is going to be criminal record and is there a voting history. And the penalty for it, if there is a voting history, that's the end of any further legal proceedings for you as far as becoming a citizen or a permanent resident of the United States. And you will go back to your country of origin. So that's a long way of explaining that this really is not something that any election authority anywhere in the country has seen happening. And there's quite a bit of research. Ben Raffensperger from Georgia did a study on this over several election cycles, found two non-citizens who had registered to vote. So there's strong disincentive for a non-citizen to attempt registering to vote. And also there are safeguards in place at the Department of Motor Vehicles now to make sure that they're not entered into our system. So anyway,
Right.
I think that we've addressed that question.
Thank you very much. Okay, explain early voting. Are ballots placed in precinct machines and transported to precincts on election day? How are early votes tabulated? And how is voting well, we know Josh has explained voting integrity, but I thought this was a good question. And then how are the early votes tabulated?
Absolutely. I can go over that. So our permanent early voting site is here in Sycamore, next door at our legislative center. Opens tomorrow morning at 8:30, FYI. We have a tabulator there that is strictly for that early voting site. Starting October 21st, we open up our satellite sites, which is Sandwich Public Library, DeKalb Township Building, NIU Home Student Center, and Kingston Friendship Center. They all have their own tabulators at those sites as well. When they close the last day of early voting, they close it just like any other polling place. So the judges that are there, prior to that, every morning, the vote total is logged and initialed when they start and when they end in the morning. So there's a process throughout all of early voting that we're ensuring that everything is being maintained throughout the entire early voting process. When the last day of early voting happens, which is the evening before election, all of that information is done just like on election night. So each of those have their own encrypted jump drive in them. We use the DS200 tabulators. They all have their serials, numbers on there, and they then close them out just like on election night, the judges themselves. We hold on to those results though until after 7 p.m. on election evening. So early voting is a little different because we know that on election day, they're precinct specific or polling place specific, because there are multiple polling places that have more than one precinct. For early voting, anyone in the county, no matter where they live, can come and early vote at any one of those early voting sites. It's the same thing as a vote center on election day as well, but it gets done exactly like when election night closes down. We just hold on to the results. Nothing is counted until after 7 p.m. Once the polls close on election night, the first sticks that we upload will be early voting and vote by mail, which again, if you're real quick, vote by mail processing happens here in our building in a locked conference room. And that has its own tabulator as well, which would have its own media stick as well that would get uploaded only after 7 p.m. on election night.
Okay. All right. Illinois has been sued for allowing mail-in ballots to be counted 14 days after election date. That's getting here. And for over 800,000 inactive voter registrations. Why is this not seen as a huge opportunity to vote in place of them? I'm
Right.
not sure.
The lawsuit that's mentioned there, they lost that lawsuit. It was an effort to have voting be only on election day, and or to have it end election day. No more ballots counted. The reason that Illinois allows, let me back up, vote by mail ballots, as long as they're postmarked no later than election day, can arrive for up to 2 weeks after election day, still be counted. Now, that system has its roots in that period of time was first created to accommodate overseas military votes. that came in from far-flung places and may have taken longer to get, you may have needed that whole 2 weeks. So that's where that 2-week period comes from. Now, the other part of that question had to do with Illinois having, I think they mentioned 800,000 inactive voters. I don't think that's quite right. It's in, I was thinking it was somewhere in their neighborhood of 600,000. I didn't check today. However, all that means is that the election authorities are doing their jobs. It means that they're taking active voters who they cannot account for, who Tasha mentioned earlier about the non-forwardable mail. When your election authority mails you that voting card and you receive it, when that can be delivered, that verifies your address and you stay an active voter. If it bounces back, though, then that's where you become an inactive voter if the election authority then cannot reach you. So someone who has moved to inactive status, those inactive voters that you see are, the vast majority of them are just waiting to be removed completely. National Voter Registration Act has a lot of requirements about the timing for actually canceling registrations, and you have to go through 2 federal cycles before you can actually cancel a voter. I did see a question come in that's related to this, and that was, is there a law requiring state or federal governments to purge their voter registrations every so often? And when was the last time DeKalb County purged their voter registrations? That's actually a good question, and it's one that I really don't like, that word purge, because it's used in a negative context by both sides. Some say that we're too heavy-handed and we're throwing legitimate voters off the rolls, and another side says you're not purging enough voters, you're letting them stay on there. And so maybe Tasha could address that a little bit.
Yes. So the last time we call it our voter registration maintenance program, because
that's much nicer. Yeah,
because
not
I
a
know
negative
purge is
connotation.
not liked very well. But we actually did that. So when I talked about we did precinct realignment, that did change quite a few voter registrations where they were going to change polling places or maybe just precincts. That was going to be substantial. So we thought, you know what, at that time, let's just go ahead and just run this whole maintenance program. So September 7th, actually 2023 is when we started doing that. So we sent out about 62,000 voter information cards to every registered voter in the county. And it put out, if the biggest thing that we try to do is encourage people that if you receive a card in the mail for someone that is not still living there, it's not you, it's no one that lives there, that you just return to sender. That is a lot of times when people say, well, they don't live there, or this person, or my kid moved so long ago and you still have them registered. If you're accepting their cards, then again, they're not coming back to us. So we have to assume that they're still there. Again, I said, building a strong foundation was very important. This voter maintenance was important because if it was going to now be, our, voter registration, I wanted to make sure it was accurate and correct. So we did that. I don't have the exact number, but I can tell you we suspended about 7,000 registered voters during that process. Now, of course, given the timing of it as well, we understand that we have people that go to much better climates here. So if you were away in Florida or Arizona and had your mail forwarded or stopped, we very well might have suspended that person. But we try to make it as simple as possible. They say, I've lived here for 40 years. If you could just show us proof, we'll just get past it. We'll reinstate you right away and we can get that process moving. We don't want anyone to have to jump through more hoops than they have to. But again, I think it's important to ensure that we have the right active voters where they say they live. So a little bit of balance. We don't try to make, that's why right now also we're saying make sure you check your voter registration before you head to the polls, not only to make sure that you're at the right address, but that you're also active as well. So that has been done here. Through that process, moving precinct lines and doing this whole registration maintenance, I had 2 to 3 staff members for 5 weeks straight go through every single voter in our database, making sure they were in the correct voting districts, making sure that they were in the right precincts. We even took it a step further and made sure that they're in the right taxing codes for some of our other departments. So it was a really, really big project, but one that I know we could step away from and say, this is what needed to be done. And I'm glad it happened when it did. So we were ready for the primary and now the general.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask this question, then my own question. So my very elderly father, who lived a wonderful life, did die this year. Should I contact you to tell you that he is deceased, or I didn't think about taking his voter registration card and saying return to sender. It just didn't occur to me.
Right. So a couple different ways. One thing that sometimes people don't realize, well, I told you we can't take anything by word. Because we want to be able to make sure that we have a reason. If we cancel someone, we don't want someone showing up at the polls and say, hey, I'm not deceased. Well, so-and-so said you were. So we want to make sure there's proof. I do have a part-time person in the office that will weekly go through our death records in the county or for anyone that lived here. We'll also take obituaries, but it makes it much, it is nice if someone lets us know, but through IVRS, through our own records, through our own research, we try to get as many people out of our database that might have passed, because it's hard for some people to see someone's name or they're still getting cards for someone who's passed, and we don't want that situation either.
Okay. Okay, how are election judges vetted?
How are election judges vetted?
That's what the question is.
Okay, sorry.
How do you vet?
Basically, we're ensuring that they're a registered voter here in DeKalb County, and active voter. They send in an application. They have to tell us, they do have to pick a party that they're wanting to represent during the election. And we go through our training. Unless there is a problem, unless we were to have had someone and there is a problem at a polling place with someone that could not be worked out, we will ask them not to come back. But we don't have a rigorous process of saying, no, not this person. We want as many people involved as possible.
Okay. Yes. There's one about lawsuits, and this one is from earlier. I've got to get it off my phone. We've received questions so far, and that article linked to one of them reference increasingly frequent numbers of data breaches. One in 2016 of the Illinois voter database, one in July 2024 of multiple entities, and one just about a week ago. Did all these actually happen, and are additional security measures being taken? Well, I know you're taking, but did these data breaches actually happen? I think that probably be you, Matt.
We talked about what happened in 2016, and that, really that set us on course to really beef up our own cybersecurity. And that's when we started introducing to the local election authorities the idea that they needed to be aware that they are cybersecurity officers now too. Now, the more recent episode that was in the news, that that didn't involve the state board. That involved an outside vendor that some clerks had contracted with. And that wasn't a data breach, but what it was a researcher who contacted one of the county clerks and said, I think I'm seeing some voter information online through this company that you contract with. And so that clerk contacted us, and we immediately contacted the vendor to make sure that it contacted all of its clients. This is kind of a complicated thing to explain because the state board was not involved. We didn't contract with this company. We certify voting systems, but they were providing services that we don't regulate. Now, when we heard about it, we made sure that we got on the company and said, what's going on here? And you need to explain to your people what is happening with their data and is it safe? So, and again, Tasha probably has more on this than I do. But there wasn't a breach in terms of an outside bad actor taking voter data. This was a case of a security researcher who said, was issuing a warning saying, hey, I'm here and I can see this and I shouldn't be able to.
So were there indeed 3 data breaches? Because we knew about 2016, July of 24, and then one about a week ago. Are those?
I think that's the one about a week ago is the one they're talking about. I am not sure what the reference to July is.
2022.
That's whenever you're ready, I can
Go ahead, Josh.
give my comments on that. I don't know anything about a week ago. I don't know anything about that. I only had read about the 2016 one, and now I know a little more about that.
Yeah.
So I think the elephant in the room, what we're all talking about is July.
Yeah.
And so I can go into a little bit of that because I know that question has come up a few times. So on July 19th of this year, the State Board of Elections had contacted us through the stick, which we had already kind of talked about, and about Platinum Technologies, who is our election vendor. We use 2 different vendors. We have ES&S, who is our, they do our machines, our tabulators, and our program. And Platinum is our election and voter registration vendor. So we were contacted by State Board on the 19th, letting us know that an ethical researcher, Jeremiah Fowler, had contacted them about a possible cybersecurity issue. At the time, again, it's one of those things that, we're doing elections, we're doing vital records and recording, and now and all the training we get from the state board and the cybersecurity, now we're cybersecurity specialists. And we do all that we can here on the county side. We have endpoint, EDR, CrowdStrike. We go through all the trainings annually, periodically. We're doing all that we can here. So then we get notified about this incident. Platinum has let us know that it came to their attention that this ethical researcher had scanned and obtained a limited number of voter registration forms. These were file storage containers and are said to have been securely segregated from the overall voter registration system. So like I had said, we always want proof. So anybody, there's documents attached to our voter registrations. So we have proof of why we canceled someone, If someone's suspended, why. It shows that we got this mail back, or if someone passed away, we'll have a death certificate in that. So those are scanned into batches. So we were told that these separate containers had been scanned or accessed. They were said within 2 days of the notification of the claim that Platinum had implemented new safeguards, and Jeremiah had contacted Platinum support desk and said that he no longer could get in, that the patch had worked. And through their investigation, there was no other evidence of any other voter registrations being obtained. That had happened on the 19th, apparently. I found out about it from State Board on August 1st. We had not known of it because there was no detection on our end. We're in our voter registration database daily all the time, and there was no indication that anything had happened. So we were very taken aback. So it's extremely frustrating situation. Here I have staff that are just busting their butts, doing everything they can to get ready for the November election. I'm out going to everything I can, trying to win over anyone to show, we're doing everything we can to make sure it's safe and secure. And I found out that our vendor has this happen, which is completely out of my control. And so to say I was ticked off is an understatement. I'm still very upset about it. But there are contracts that are in place. There is an election that's 41 days away. That time clock doesn't stop. We have been assured that there was nothing scanned or taken, there was no issues, and whatever had been open was closed right away. But that doesn't negate the fact of this had happened. I have requested from our vendor a couple times now that I think a third party audit needs to be done, because I'd like to know exactly what had happened, making sure that they have everything. They've assured us that.
I hate to cut you off, but we only have a minute left.
Okay.
And what I want to do is thank both of you so much. This has been great. I want everybody to know that you can still send questions to WNIJ, but this will be posted on WNIJ's website. It will be saved there. It will be saved to the League of Women Voters of DeKalb County's YouTube channel and website. It'll be on the state board. And I think our time is up. Thank you so much.